Ethan Morelli had built an empire on control, over his enemies, his empire, his very heartbeat. But nothing prepared him for the moment he walked into Raphael's and saw his assistant, Claire Bennett, laughing at another man's jokes. The sight hit him like a bullet he never saw coming, shattering the careful walls he'd built around a truth he'd buried deep. He was in love with the one woman he could never have. What happened next would crack open the most dangerous man in the city and force him to choose between the power that defined him and the love that could destroy him. If you're ready to witness a mafia boss lose the one battle that truly matters, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story of jealousy, power, and impossible love travels across the world. The rain had started as a whisper against the windows of Raphael's, the kind of exclusive Manhattan restaurant where reservations required either substantial wealth or substantial fear. Ethan Morelli possessed both in quantities that made lesser men tremble. He stepped through the mahogany doors at exactly 8:15, his Tom Ford suit perfectly tailored, his dark hair swept back with the precision of a man who controlled every detail of his existence. Marco, his second in command, followed 3 steps behind, the appropriate distance for a soldier who understood the hierarchy of respect. The maitre d' recognized Ethan instantly, his professional smile faltering just slightly as it always did when dangerous men entered civilized spaces. "Mr. Morelli, your table is ready. The Venetian room, as requested." Ethan nodded, his steel-gray eyes already scanning the main dining area with the automatic assessment of a predator. He cataloged exits, counted potential threats, noted the elderly couple by the fireplace, the young businessman nervously adjusting his tie near the bar. His entire world stopped. There, by the window overlooking Fifth Avenue, bathed in the soft golden light that made her honey-blonde hair shimmer like silk, sat Claire Bennett, his assistant, his perfectly professional, always composed, meticulously controlled assistant. And she was laughing. Not the polite, measured response she gave during board meetings, not the careful smile she offered when handling his legitimate business partners. This was genuine, unguarded joy. Her head tilted back slightly, her hand resting near her throat in that unconscious gesture she made when truly amused. Her entire face illuminated with a warmth that made something in Ethan's chest crack. She wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man, mid-30s, expensive but not custom suit, decent haircut, the kind of clean-cut corporate type who probably worked in finance or law. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening, nothing that should have made Ethan's hands curl into fists or caused the sudden, violent surge of something dark and possessive to flood through his veins. "Boss?" Marco's voice came from somewhere distant, concerned. "The meeting? Change of plans." Ethan's voice was barely recognizable, even to himself, low, rough, dangerous. "Tell Castellano I'll be delayed." "But boss, he flew in from—" "Did I stutter, Marco?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Marco retreated without another word, and Ethan found himself moving toward the bar, choosing a seat that offered an unobstructed view of Claire's table while maintaining enough distance to avoid immediate detection. He ordered scotch. 18-year-old Macallan. He didn't touch it. Instead, he watched. Claire reached for her wine glass. White, probably Chardonnay. She preferred crisp wines. And the man across from her leaned forward, saying something that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. Ethan had spent 3 years working alongside this woman, had memorized every micro-expression, every subtle shift in her demeanor that signaled approval or concern or the particular brand of exasperation she reserved for his most unreasonable demands. He knew her. He knew the way she twisted her pen when thinking through complex problems, knew she took her coffee with cream but no sugar, knew she had a law degree from Columbia she'd never used because she'd needed immediate income to help her sister through medical school. Knew she wore glasses when working late, delicate frames she thought made her look severe, but actually made her look devastatingly beautiful. He knew her schedule by heart. Tuesday evenings she had standing dinner with her sister. Thursdays she attended a book club. Saturdays she volunteered at a women's shelter in Brooklyn, something she thought he didn't know about, but which he'd had verified by his security team within a week of her hiring. There had been no date scheduled for tonight. No social engagement noted in the calendar she maintained with military precision. which meant either this was spontaneous, unlikely for a woman who planned everything, or she'd deliberately omitted this information. She'd hidden this from him. The man touched her hand. It was casual, friendly. His fingers brushed across her knuckles as he emphasized whatever point he was making, lingering for perhaps 2 seconds before withdrawing. Nothing overtly intimate, nothing that would draw attention from other diners. Ethan's vision went red at the edges. He was on his feet before conscious thought could intervene, crossing the dining room with the predatory grace that made smart people step aside. The scotch sat abandoned on the bar, untouched. Several diners looked up, recognition flickering in their eyes, followed quickly by the instinct to look away. They knew who he was. They knew what he was. And they knew to mind their own business. Claire sensed him before she saw him. He watched her posture change, that subtle stiffening of her spine that meant her guard had snapped into place. She turned, and for a fraction of a second her eyes widened with genuine surprise. "Mr. Morelli." Her voice was perfectly professional despite the intimate setting, despite the wine, despite the fact that they weren't supposed to be here, in this moment where the carefully maintained boundaries of their relationship had no place. "This is unexpected." The man across from her stood, extending his hand with the confident smile of someone who didn't understand the danger he'd just invited into his evening. "I'm David Patterson. You must be one of Claire's colleagues." Ethan looked at the offered hand with the same expression he might give a cockroach on his dinner plate. He didn't shake it. Instead, his gaze fixed on Claire with an intensity that made her breath catch. He saw it, the slight hitch in her chest, the pulse point at her throat jumping. "We need to discuss the Morrison contract," Ethan said, his voice carrying the unmistakable edge of command. "Now." Claire's eyes flashed. There it was, the fire she usually banked behind professional courtesy. "The Morrison contract was finalized this afternoon, as you're well aware. My work hours ended at 6. "Your work hours end when I say they end." "Excuse me?" David interjected, his confidence finally wavering as he registered the tension crackling between them. "Claire, is everything all right? Do you know this man?" "This is Ethan Morelli," Claire said, her tone careful. "My employer." The way she said employer, with just enough emphasis to remind him of exactly what he was and wasn't to her, felt like a knife between his ribs. "I see." David glanced between them, clearly picking up on something he couldn't quite identify, but that made him uncomfortable. "Well, I'm sure whatever business matter this is can wait until morning. We're in the middle of—" "You're dismissed," Ethan said, not even looking at the man. His eyes remained locked on Claire. "I beg your pardon?" David's face flushed. "You can't just—" "David." Claire's voice cut through sharply. She stood, placing her napkin on the table with deliberate care. "I'm so sorry. Would you mind giving us a moment?" "Claire, you don't have to. Please." Something in her tone, firm but not unkind, made David nod stiffly. He shot Ethan a look that tried for challenging but landed somewhere around intimidated, then walked toward the bar with forced dignity. The moment he was out of earshot, Claire turned on Ethan with barely contained fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I could ask you the same question." "I'm having dinner, on my own time, in my own life, neither of which you have any claim to." "Is this why you've been distracted lately? Why you've been leaving at exactly 6 instead of staying late?" Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "Distracted? I processed 47 contracts last week, coordinated your meetings across 3 time zones, and prevented a PR disaster when Castellano's nephew decided to shoot his mouth off to that reporter. I've been nothing but professional and excellent at my job, which is all you have any right to expect from me." She was right. Rationally, logically, he knew she was right. But nothing about this moment was rational or logical. Nothing about the way his heart was slamming against his ribs or the possessive fury burning through his veins had anything to do with reason. "Who is he?" The question came out rougher than intended. "That's none of your business." "Everything about you is my business." "No." Claire stepped closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "You don't get to do this. You pay me a salary. You own my 9 to 5. You don't own me." "Claire, we're done here, Mr. Morelli." She emphasized his formal title like a weapon. "Go to your meeting. I'm going back to my date." She turned away. He caught her wrist. It wasn't rough. His touch never was, not with her. But it was unmistakably possessive, his fingers circling the delicate bones of her wrist with the kind of certainty that said he had no intention of letting go. Don't. The word was barely a whisper, raw and stripped of all his usual control. Claire froze. He felt her pulse racing beneath his fingers, fast and hard. When she looked back at him, something flickered in her eyes, confusion, maybe, or recognition of the thing he'd worked so hard to hide. Don't what? Her voice was quieter now, uncertain. Don't smile at him like that. Don't let him touch you. Don't give him the warmth you've never shown me. Don't make me realize what I've been denying for 3 years. Don't make me feel this. Don't pretend this doesn't matter, he said instead. What doesn't matter? That you're creating a scene in a public restaurant? That you're treating me like property? That he touched you? The words hung between them, stark and revealing. Claire's eyes widened, and Ethan watched understanding dawn across her face, along with something that might have been shock or might have been something more dangerous. You're jealous. He should have denied it. Should have laughed it off, retreated behind the armor of his position and power, turned this into a discussion about professional boundaries or security concerns. That's what the rational part of his brain screamed at him to do. Instead, he told the truth. Yes. The single word seemed to suck all the air from the space between them. Claire stared at him like she'd never seen him before, her professional mask cracking to reveal something raw and confused and heartbreakingly vulnerable. Ethan. She never called him by his first name. Not in 3 years. We can't. I know. I work for you. I know. This crosses every line, every boundary we've carefully maintained. I know. Then why? Her voice broke slightly. Why are you doing this? Why now? Because watching another man touch you made me realize I've been lying to myself. Because the thought of you laughing at his jokes, sharing wine with him, maybe going home with him, it makes me want to burn this entire city down. Because I'm losing control and I don't know how to stop it. Because I can't watch you walk away with him. Claire's breath came faster now. He could see her mind working, processing, trying to reconcile the cold, controlled mafia boss she'd worked alongside for 3 years with the man standing before her now, possessive, raw, barely restraining the need to claim what he had no right to claim. What do you want from me? She whispered. Everything. Your laugh, your warmth, the way you look when you're passionate about something, the sharp intelligence behind your eyes, the fierce loyalty you show to people you care about. I want to be worthy of that loyalty. I want to be the man you choose, not the man who signs your paychecks. I don't know, he lied. She pulled her wrist from his grip slowly, deliberately. He let her go, even though it cost him more than he'd admit. I need to think, she said quietly. And you need to figure out what you're really saying here. Because if this is just some alpha male territorial thing, if you're just reacting to someone else showing interest, then we're going to have a very different conversation tomorrow. But if this is, she trailed off, seemed to search for words. If this is something real, Ethan, then we're in territory neither of us knows how to navigate. She walked back to David's table, collected her coat and purse while murmuring something to the clearly confused man, then headed for the exit without looking back. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of Raphael's dining room, aware that every person in the restaurant was studiously pretending not to have witnessed what just transpired while simultaneously memorizing every detail to share later. He didn't care. Marco appeared at his elbow. Boss, Castellano is asking, cancel it. But, cancel. Everything. Tonight. Ethan walked out into the rain, which had progressed from whisper to downpour. His driver materialized with an umbrella, but Ethan waved him off, standing on the sidewalk as water soaked through his $1,000 suit. He watched Claire climb into a taxi, watched it pull into traffic, watched it disappear around the corner. And for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Morelli, a man who'd clawed his way up from Brooklyn's bloodiest streets, who'd built an empire that spanned the eastern seaboard, who'd never lost a fight or backed down from a challenge, didn't know what to do. The following morning arrived with the kind of cruel clarity that only comes after a sleepless night. Ethan sat in his penthouse office, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of Manhattan that felt more like mockery than luxury. The city he controlled spread out before him, millions of lives and thousands of businesses flowing according to patterns he helped orchestrate. But he couldn't control this. His phone buzzed. A text from Marco. "She's here, conference room, on time as always." Of course she was. Claire Bennett was nothing if not professional. The question was whether she'd be cold, distant, whether she'd already drafted her resignation letter, whether last night had destroyed the best working relationship he'd ever had, whether it had destroyed something that might have become more. He made her wait 15 minutes, a petty power play he regretted even as he executed it. When he finally entered the conference room, Claire stood by the window, her back to him, wearing her armor, a charcoal gray suit that was perfectly professional, her hair twisted into the sleek chignon she favored for important meetings, her posture radiating the same controlled composure that had made her invaluable to him. "Claire," she turned. Her face was professionally neutral, but he caught the shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. "Mr. Morelli." Back to formal. "Of course. I've prepared the briefing documents for the Castellano meeting that you'll need to reschedule. I've also drafted talking points for the conference call with our Las Vegas associates, and I've compiled the quarterly reports you requested. All business." As if last night hadn't happened. As if he hadn't essentially confessed to being jealous, to wanting her, to crossing every line they'd carefully maintained. "We need to talk about last night." "Do we?" She crossed to the conference table, laying out documents with precise movements. "I thought perhaps we might exercise our mutual talent for compartmentalization. You're very good at it, after all." The barb landed. He deserved it. "I was out of line." "Yes, you were. I had no right to interrupt your personal time." "No, you didn't. I shouldn't have confronted you in public." "Definitely not." She still wouldn't look at him directly. Ethan moved around the table, closing the distance she was trying to maintain. "Claire, look at me." She did, and the ice in her blue eyes could have frozen the harbor. "What do you want me to say, Ethan? That I forgive you?" "Fine, you're forgiven. That I understand?" "I don't, but I'm willing to pretend I do if it means we can go back to normal. That I'll forget this happened?" "I can try." "What if I don't want to forget?" Her facade cracked just slightly. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't do this." She set down the papers she'd been holding, her hands trembling slightly. "Don't make this harder than it already is. You're my boss. You're God, Ethan. You're a mafia boss. You have power and influence and enemies and a life that exists in shadows I can't even imagine, and I'm just what? Just the most intelligent, capable, fiercely loyal person I've ever met? Just the woman who sees through my bullshit and calls me on it? Just the only person I trust to handle the things that actually matter? Just your employee. You're not just anything." Claire laughed, but it sounded broken. 3 years. 3 years we've worked together, and you've been nothing but professional, distant. You've never even complimented me beyond commenting on my efficiency. You've never asked about my personal life beyond what's necessary for scheduling. You've certainly never shown any indication that you saw me as anything other than a very well-paid assistant. "I know. Then what the hell was last night about? What changed? Seeing you with someone else, realizing you have a life I'm not part of. Understanding that you could walk away tomorrow and build something with a man who doesn't live in my world. Recognizing that the control I've maintained has been a lie I told myself because the truth was too dangerous to admit." "I saw you happy," he said quietly. "Really happy. And I realized I've never been the cause of that happiness. I've given you stress and impossible situations and late nights. I've taken your brilliance for granted. I've kept you at arm's length because why?" He moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her blue eyes, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. Something light and professional, jasmine maybe. Close enough to make this real instead of theoretical. "Because getting close to me is dangerous. The people I care about become targets. The people I love become liabilities." Her breath caught at the word love, but he pressed on. "I've spent 3 years telling myself that keeping you at a distance was protecting you. That maintaining professional boundaries was the kindest thing I could do. That my control was a gift, not a prison." He paused. "Last night, watching you with him, I realized my control was never about protecting you. It was about protecting me. From what? From this. From feeling something I can't command or manipulate or strategize around. From wanting something I have no right to want. From needing someone who deserves better than what I can offer. Claire's eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. You can't just say these things, Ethan. You can't just crack open like this and expect… What? What do you expect from me? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with a gentleness that surprised them both. I'm not good at this. At feelings. At vulnerability. My father beat that out of me before I was 10. This world I live in, it doesn't allow for softness or sentiment or the kind of love that makes you stupid. Then why are you telling me? Because you asked for the truth, and because I'm tired of lying. She pulled back from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. I can't be your midlife crisis, Ethan. I can't be the thing you want because you can't have it, and I definitely can't be some prize you're competing for because another man showed interest. This isn't about him. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, you showed zero interest in my personal life until you saw me on a date. Zero indication that you saw me as anything other than a very expensive tool in your organization. And now suddenly, you're confessing feelings? You're talking about love? That's not real, Ethan. That's ego. The words stung because part of them rang true. Was he only feeling this because of the threat of losing her? Was this possessiveness masquerading as something deeper? You're right, he admitted. Seeing you with him was the catalyst, but it wasn't the cause. Then what was? He turned away, moving to the window, looking out over the city he'd conquered but couldn't control. Do you remember the Marconi situation, 6 months ago? When they tried to muscle in on the docks? Of course. Do you remember how it ended? You negotiated a truce, divided the territory in a way that benefited both families while preventing bloodshed. Do you know why? Claire frowned. Because you're smarter than they are. Because you understood that a war would cost more than the territory was worth. Because you asked me to find another way. Silence. It was a Thursday, Ethan continued, his voice distant. Late. You were still here, working on the quarterly reports. I was about to give the order for Marcus and his crew to hit the Marconi warehouse. It would have been brutal, but effective. Would have sent exactly the message I needed to send. I don't remember. You brought me coffee. You looked exhausted, and you said something, it seemed offhand at the time. You said, whatever you're planning, I hope there's a world where you get to make different choices. Then you went back to your desk. Claire's hand moved to her throat, that unconscious gesture she made when emotional. I called off the hit, spent the next 72 hours working out an alternative that didn't involve body bags and federal investigations. Because you hoped for a world where I could make different choices. Because your opinion mattered more than my reputation. That was 6 months ago. And there have been 100 other moments like it. Times when your presence has made me better. Moments when your faith in me, however misplaced, has pushed me to choose differently. You've changed me, Claire. Slowly, subtly. In ways I didn't recognize until last night when I thought I might lose you. She moved beside him at the window, both of them staring out at the city rather than at each other. I had no idea. You weren't supposed to. I couldn't let you see. Because if you saw, you'd have power over me. Real power. Not the kind that comes from information or leverage, but the kind that comes from… He struggled with the words. From mattering. I matter to you. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. More than anything. They stood in silence for a long moment, the city sprawling beneath them, the weight of confession settling between them like something fragile and dangerous. David is a lawyer, Claire said finally. Corporate litigation. We met at a benefit auction for literacy programs 3 months ago. He's smart, successful, comes from a good family. He has no connection to your world, no complications, no danger. Each word felt like a knife. Sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? She laughed softly. Safe, simple, the kind of relationship a woman like me is supposed to want. But I spent the entire dinner comparing him to you. Ethan's heart stopped. He told a funny story about a case he won, and I thought about how you would have told it. Sharper, more ruthless, funnier without trying to be. He ordered wine without asking my preference, and I thought about how you've never once forgotten that I prefer white to red, crisp to sweet. He talked about his weekend plans, golf and brunch, and I thought about how you've probably never played golf in your life and would find brunch insufferably boring. Claire, I realized halfway through the appetizer that I didn't want to be there. That I'd rather be in my office working late on your impossible demands than sitting across from a perfectly nice man who should be exactly what I want. She finally turned to look at him. So when you ask if last night was just your ego reacting to competition? Maybe. But my reaction wasn't about being interrupted. It was about being relieved. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. What does that mean? Ethan asked, his voice rough. It means I'm just as screwed up about this as you are. It means that somewhere in the last 3 years, you stopped being just my boss and became something else. Something I didn't want to examine too closely because examining it meant acknowledging it. And acknowledging it meant dealing with all the impossible complications that come with caring about a man who lives in shadows. I don't want you in those shadows. That's not your choice to make. Claire, no, listen. She faced him fully now, her eyes blazing with the fire he'd glimpsed at the restaurant. You don't get to decide what's safe for me. You don't get to protect me by pushing me away. If we're doing this, if we're even considering doing this, then it has to be as equals. Not boss and employee, not protector and protected. Equals. The things I've done, the world I live in, you think I don't know? She moved closer, fearless in a way that both terrified and amazed him. I've worked for you for 3 years, Ethan. I coordinate your meetings, manage your communications, handle your accounts. I'm not naive about what happens in those meetings. I'm not blind to where the money comes from. I've made my peace with that. Have you? I've made my peace with you. With the man who negotiates peace instead of ordering hits. With the boss who's never once raised his voice at me even when I deserved it. With the person who remembers that my sister is allergic to shellfish and sends her flowers on her birthday even though you've never met her. With the complicated, controlled, occasionally terrifying man who just admitted he's been lying to himself about his feelings because he thought it was protecting me. She reached up, her hand gentle against his jaw. I see you, Ethan Morelli. Not the reputation, not the power, you. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starving for contact. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone. Neither do I, not with you, not with all the complications and dangers and impossible logistics. She smiled sadly. But I think we've been doing it anyway, slowly, carefully. 3 years of learning each other, 3 years of trust and partnership, and something neither of us wanted to name. What do we do now? I don't know, but I know what we don't do. Her voice firmed. We don't lie anymore, not to each other, not to ourselves, and we don't make decisions based on fear. I'm afraid of what could happen to you. I'm afraid of what I feel for you. She matched his honesty. I'm afraid of losing myself in your world. I'm afraid that caring this much about someone is going to break me when something goes wrong. Then maybe we should... Don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't you dare suggest we walk away. Don't insult what we both just admitted by pretending fear is a reason to run. It's not that simple. No, it's not. But nothing worth having ever is. She lowered her hand. I'm not asking for simple, Ethan. I'm asking for honest. I'm asking for you to stop treating me like something fragile that needs to be locked away. I'm asking for a chance to figure this out together instead of you making unilateral decisions about what's best for me. He studied her face, memorizing this moment. Claire Bennett, fierce and fearless, demanding to be seen as his equal despite every reason she had to run, demanding that he be brave enough to want what he wanted instead of hiding behind excuses of protection. If we do this, he said slowly, there are things you need to understand, dangers you'll face, enemies who will see you as leverage, complications that will touch every part of your life. I know. You could get hurt, killed, used against me. I know that too. I can't promise you normal. I can't give you the white picket fence or the simple life or... Did I ask for any of that? She tilted her head, challenging. Have I ever, in 3 years, Given you the impression that I want simple? No. Then stop trying to talk me out of this. Stop giving me reasons to run. If you don't want this, if you're not sure, then say that. But don't hide behind concern for my safety. I'm a grown woman who's made plenty of dangerous choices, including working for you in the first place. Respect me enough to let me make this one. God, she was magnificent, fierce and intelligent and brave enough to stand up to him when most people would have run. How had he convinced himself he could keep her at a distance? How had he lasted 3 years without touching her, claiming her, making sure she knew exactly how extraordinary she was? I want this, he admitted. I want you. More than I've wanted anything in my life. Then stop talking and show me. He pulled her against him, not roughly, but with the certainty of a man who'd finally stopped fighting what he felt. She came willingly, her body fitting against his like they'd been designed for this moment. Her hand slid up his chest, around his neck, fingers threading through his hair. This changes everything, he murmured against her temple. I know. People will talk. Enemies will notice. Your safety is my concern. She pulled back enough to look at him. We're doing this as equals, remember? That means you get to worry, but you don't get to decide for me. You're going to be difficult about this, aren't you? Absolutely. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him all morning. You hired me because I don't back down. Did you think that would change just because we're... whatever this is? What is this? Her smile faded into something more serious, more vulnerable. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. He kissed her then, finally, after 3 years of denial and distance. It wasn't tentative or careful, it was claiming and possessive, and everything he'd held back poured into the press of his mouth against hers. She responded with equal intensity, her fingers tightening in his hair, her body pressed against his like she was trying to erase the 3 years of space they'd maintained. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his chest. We're going to have to tell people. Not everyone. Not right away. Your enemies will eventually find out, yes, but we can control the narrative, control how and when information spreads. His arms tightened around her. I need time to ensure your protection, to set up safeguards. See, this is what I mean about making decisions for me. It's not... He stopped, recognizing the trap. You're right. We need to discuss this. Together. Better. She pulled back, her professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Right now, though, you have a meeting with Castellano that you postponed, and I have 17 emails that need responses. So perhaps we should table the existential relationship discussion until after work hours. Just like that? Back to business? Just like that. But her eyes were warm, softer than he'd ever seen them. Unless you'd prefer to spend the day dissecting our feelings instead of running your empire? He smiled, something he rarely did, something that felt rusty from disuse. When did you become so practical about emotional chaos? I work for you, remember? Chaos is my natural state. She moved toward the door, collecting her documents. Castellano at 10, conference call at 2, and you have that thing at 7. What thing? The charity gala. The one you've been avoiding for 3 months. Your social coordinator finally cornered me yesterday and made me promise you'd attend. He'd forgotten. Some Arts Foundation event that required his appearance for legitimacy reasons. Cancel it. No. He raised an eyebrow. No? You committed, and you need to maintain appearances. Besides, she paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder with a smile that was pure mischief. I'll be there. You're going? I'm always there, Ethan, making sure you don't insult anyone important or make commitments you can't keep. I just usually stay in the background. Her smile widened. But maybe tonight I won't. She left him standing in the conference room, his heart racing, his carefully controlled world tilting on its axis. For the first time in 3 years, Claire Bennett had surprised him. And God help him, he wanted her to do it again. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, because of course it was. These events always chose venues that screamed wealth and culture, as if hosting a party surrounded by priceless artifacts somehow elevated the attendees beyond their base desires for power and recognition. Ethan had attended dozens of these affairs over the years, each one blending into the next, a parade of fake smiles, strategic conversations, and the careful dance of maintaining his dual identity as legitimate businessman and something far more dangerous. Tonight felt different. He stood in the Great Hall, nursing champagne he had no intention of drinking, watching the city's elite swirl around him in their designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Politicians rubbed shoulders with hedge fund managers. Old money assessed new money with thinly veiled disdain. And somewhere in this crowd of sharks in evening wear, Claire was moving through the periphery, doing what she always did, managing details, smoothing interactions, making him look better than he deserved. Except tonight, he couldn't stop looking for her. Morelli. A hand clapped his shoulder, and Ethan turned to find Richard Castellano looking remarkably cheerful for a man whose meeting had been postponed twice. Finally made it to one of these things. Was starting to think you were allergic to culture. Just selective about my exposure, Ethan replied smoothly. How's your nephew? Still learning to keep his mouth shut, thanks for asking. Castellano's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. We should reschedule that conversation. Soon. Monday work for you? Monday's fine. Castellano leaned in, lowering his voice. Heard something interesting. Vinnie Marconi's been asking questions about your operations, specifically about your shipping routes. Ethan's expression didn't change, but his mind started calculating. Marconi should know better than to get curious about things that don't concern him. That's what I thought, but he's been persistent, asking the wrong people the wrong questions. Castellano straightened, his smile back in place for the benefit of anyone watching. Just thought you should know. These things have a way of escalating if you're not careful. I appreciate the heads up. We're friends, aren't we? The word friends carried weight in their world. Obligations, expectations, debts that would eventually need repaying. Besides, stability is good for everyone. Last thing any of us need is another territorial pissing match. Castellano moved off into the crowd, and Ethan found himself scanning the room again, looking for honey blonde hair and sharp blue eyes, looking for the woman who'd somehow become the center of his carefully controlled universe. He found her by the Egyptian wing, speaking with Margaret Rothschild, the foundation's president. Claire wore midnight blue, a color he'd never seen on her before, the dress somehow managing to be both perfectly professional and devastating. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves over bare shoulders, and Ethan felt that now familiar surge of possessiveness mixed with something deeper, more complicated. She laughed at something Margaret said, and the sound carried across the space between them like a physical touch. She's remarkable, isn't she? Ethan turned to find Eleanor Vance watching him with knowing eyes. Eleanor ran one of the city's most prestigious PR firms and had enough dirt on Manhattan's elite to topple governments. She was also sharp enough to read people like books, which made her both valuable and dangerous. Mrs. Vance? Oh, please, we've known each other too long for formalities. She sipped her champagne, her gaze drifting back to Claire. Your assistant, Claire Bennett. Columbia Law, top 15% of her class, could have had her pick of firms, but chose to work for you instead. Interesting career choice. She's exceptional at what she does. I'm sure she is. Eleanor's smile was knowing. The way you're looking at her suggests you've noticed that fact. Ethan kept his expression neutral. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't, she laughed softly. A word of advice from someone who's seen a lot of powerful men make a lot of stupid decisions? Whatever you're thinking about doing, and the fact that you're thinking about it is written all over your face, make sure you're prepared for the consequences. There are always consequences. True, but some are more costly than others. Eleanor touched his arm lightly. She seems like a smart woman, smart enough to know what she's getting into, smart enough to handle it. The question is whether you're smart enough to let her. Before Ethan could respond, Eleanor glided away, leaving him with the uncomfortable feeling of having been thoroughly read. He didn't like it. Didn't like that his carefully maintained mask had slipped enough for someone like Eleanor Vance to see through it. He needed air. The museum's rooftop garden was technically off limits during events, but Ethan had learned long ago that rules were suggestions for people who knew how to navigate them. He found the service elevator, rode it to the top floor, and stepped out into the cool night air. The city spread out before him, a glittering maze of lights and shadows. From up here, it looked peaceful, beautiful even. You couldn't see the violence or corruption or desperate struggles playing out in those streets. You couldn't see the dark underbelly that Ethan knew intimately, had helped shape, had profited from. I wondered where you disappeared to. He turned to find Claire stepping out of the shadows, somehow having found the same escape route he had. Of course she had. She always seemed to know where he'd go, what he'd need, before he knew it himself. How did you... I pay attention. She moved to stand beside him at the railing, her shoulder brushing his. You get this look when you're overwhelmed, like you need to remember why you do any of this. Usually you'd step outside to smoke, except you quit 3 years ago, so now you just stand and think. You know me too well. Someone has to. She was quiet for a moment, both of them looking out over the city. Eleanor Vance cornered me, asked if I was sleeping with you. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did you tell her? That my personal life was none of her business. Then she laughed and said that non-denials were as good as confirmation in her world. Claire glanced at him. We're not being as subtle as you think. I haven't touched you. Haven't even stood too close. No, but you've been watching me all night, and I've been watching you watch me. People notice these things, Ethan, especially people like Eleanor who make their living reading between lines. Does that bother you? The speculation or the reality of what they're speculating about? Both. Claire turned to face him fully, leaning against the railing. I knew what I was signing up for this morning. Knew that choosing this, choosing you, meant dealing with exactly this kind of scrutiny. So no, it doesn't bother me. But we need to be smart about it. Smart how? We need to decide what we're doing. Are we hiding this, being discreet, going public? She held up a hand before he could answer. And before you make some unilateral decision about protecting me, remember what I said about being equals. I remember. He moved closer, close enough to catch her scent. Different tonight, something richer, more sensual than her usual professional choice. What do you want? I want to not have this conversation on a rooftop at a gala where you're supposed to be networking. That's not an answer. No, it's not. She smiled slightly. The truth? I don't know yet. Part of me wants to keep this private, at least until we figure out what this is. But another part of me is tired of pretending, tired of maintaining distance when what I want is... She trailed off. What do you want, Claire? She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw the same conflict he felt, desire warring with caution, need fighting against the practical realities of their situation. I want to not have to think about who's watching. I want to touch you without calculating the political fallout. I want one moment that's just ours, without all the complications we both know are coming. He understood. God, did he understand. Every instinct he possessed screamed at him to pull back, to maintain the distance that had kept them both safe for 3 years. But there was a newer instinct, raw and demanding, that wanted exactly what she wanted, one moment of honesty before the world made it complicated. Then take it, he said quietly. Claire searched his face, looking for something, permission, maybe, or certainty. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her because she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was different from this morning, softer, more deliberate, a choice made slowly instead of grabbed desperately. Her hands slid up his chest, fingers curling into his lapels, and Ethan let himself sink into the moment, into the feel of her against him, the taste of champagne on her lips, the small sound she made when he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, Claire rested her forehead against his chest, breathing hard. We should go back down. Probably. Neither of them moved. Ethan? Her voice was muffled against his shirt. Yeah? I'm terrified. The admission caught him off guard. Claire Bennett, who'd stared down hostile board members and negotiated with dangerous men without flinching, was admitting to fear. Of what? Of how much I want this. Of how much I want you. She pulled back to look at him. 3 years I've kept it locked down. Told myself it was just admiration for your intelligence. respect for your capabilities, professional appreciation. But it wasn't. It was never just that. Claire, let me finish. She took a breath. I'm terrified because I know how this could end. I've seen what happens to people in your world who care about the wrong things, who become liabilities. I've processed the insurance claims, handled the funeral arrangements, sent the flowers. I know exactly what I'm risking. Then why? Because the alternative is worse. Her hands fisted in his jacket. The alternative is walking away, finding someone safe and boring, and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. Wondering if you'd have been worth the risk. Wondering if I was brave enough to choose what I wanted instead of what made sense. He pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. I can't promise you safe. I know. I can't promise you easy. I know that too. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you alive, to keep you protected, to make sure that choosing me doesn't destroy you. Everything in your power is considerable, she said with a hint of her usual dry humor. But, Ethan, you can't control everything. Eventually, something's going to go wrong. Then we'll handle it, together. She pulled back, studying his face in the dim light. Together. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm counting on it. They stood there for another moment, the sounds of the party drifting up from below, music and laughter and the clink of glasses, the world continuing on, unaware that something fundamental had shifted on this rooftop. We should really go back, Claire said again, making no move to leave. Yes. People will notice we're both missing. Probably. Eleanor Vance will have a field day. Definitely. Claire laughed, the sound lighter than it had been. You're not helping. I'm not trying to. He brushed a strand of hair back from her face, letting his fingers linger against her cheek. I spent 3 years not doing this. Not touching you. Not letting myself have what I wanted. I'm not in a hurry to go back to that. We don't have to. Go back to that, I mean. She caught his hand, pressing it more firmly against her face. But we do need to be smart. Strategic. Your world doesn't allow for reckless romance. No, it doesn't. So we go back down, separately. We maintain professional distance for the rest of the evening, and then tomorrow we sit down and figure out how to actually do this without getting either of us killed. Tomorrow's Saturday. So? So you don't work Saturdays? Claire smiled. I make exceptions for important projects. And this, figuring out how to be with you without imploding both our lives, seems pretty important. Where? Your place. More secure than mine. We'll need privacy for this conversation. The casual way she said it, the assumption that he'd want her in his personal space, that she'd be comfortable there, sent a wave of something warm through his chest. My place. Tomorrow. What time? 10. I'll bring coffee and those pastries you pretend not to like but always eat anyway. I don't pretend. He stopped, seeing her knowing smile. You're enjoying this, having ammunition to use against me. Oh, immensely. 3 years of carefully catalogued observations are about to become very useful. She stepped back, smoothing her dress, her professional mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. I'm going down first. Give it 5 minutes, then follow. Try not to look like you've been making out with your assistant on a rooftop. Is that what we were doing? Making out? Among other things. She moved toward the elevator, then paused, looking back. Ethan? Thank you. For what? For being honest. For letting me see this side of you. She smiled softly. For being terrified, too. Then she was gone, the elevator doors closing behind her, leaving Ethan alone with the city and his thoughts. He gave her the requested 5 minutes, using the time to compose himself, to rebuild the mask he wore for public consumption. By the time he stepped back into the gala, he was once again Ethan Morelli, controlled, powerful, untouchable. But his eyes found Claire immediately, tracking her movements through the crowd with the focus of a predator marking prey. She was speaking with the mayor now, her posture relaxed, her smile professional. To anyone watching, she was simply doing her job, networking on her employer's behalf, managing relationships, being the perfect assistant. Only Ethan could see the slight flush still coloring her cheeks. Only he knew that beneath that professional exterior, she was as affected by what had happened on the rooftop as he was. Mr. Morelli. A woman's voice pulled his attention. He turned to find Sophia Chen, a state senator with expensive tastes and flexible morals. I was hoping to run into you tonight. Senator, always a pleasure. I'm sure. Her smile was calculating. I wanted to discuss that development project in Queens, the one my committee has been reviewing. And just like that, Ethan was pulled back into the world he knew. The careful negotiations, the implied threats, the dance of power and influence that defined his existence. He engaged with Sophia, then with a real estate developer, then with a prosecutor who somehow thought they were friends rather than adversaries playing a long game. Through it all, he remained aware of Claire, watching her work the room with the same skill he employed, managing conversations and relationships with effortless grace. She caught his eye once across the crowd, and something passed between them, understanding maybe or acknowledgement of the secret they now shared. The evening wore on. Ethan made the required appearances, had the necessary conversations, wrote the expected checks to the foundation. By 11, he'd fulfilled his social obligations and was more than ready to leave. He found Claire near the coat check, speaking with Marco, who'd arrived to provide security for the departure. She glanced up as Ethan approached, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. Morelli, are you ready to leave? Yes. Marco, bring the car around. Already done, boss. They rode the elevator down in silence, Claire standing at the appropriate professional distance, Marco playing the role of watchful soldier. It wasn't until they were in the back of the car, Marco driving and the privacy partition up, that either of them spoke. That was exhausting, Claire said, letting her head fall back against the seat. Welcome to my world. I've been in your world for 3 years. Tonight was just the first time I was in it differently. She turned to look at him. Eleanor cornered me again, right before you left. What did she say? That you looked at me the way her late husband used to look at her. That if I was smart, I'd either run or commit fully, because half measures in your world get people killed. Claire's voice was matter-of-fact. Then she gave me her card and said if I ever needed advice from someone who'd loved a dangerous man and survived, I should call. Eleanor's husband died in a car accident. That's the official story, yes. Claire met his eyes. But we both know what a car accident can mean in certain circles. They did. It was a common enough cover for assassinations. Arrange a mechanical failure, stage a crash, let the authorities write it off as tragic but accidental. Clean, untraceable. The kind of death that happened to people who got too close to the wrong things. Are you trying to talk yourself out of this? Ethan asked carefully. No. I'm trying to be realistic about what this is, what it could become. She reached across the seat, taking his hand. I'm not naive, Ethan. I know the risks. I'm just trying to decide if I'm brave enough to take them anyway. You're the bravest person I know. That's because you don't know what goes on in my head. She squeezed his hand. I'm good at looking calm, at appearing controlled. But inside, I'm terrified 90% of the time. Terrified I'll make a mistake that costs you a deal. Terrified I'll miss something important. Terrified that one day you'll realize you could do better and I'll lose the best job I've ever had. Claire, and now I'm terrified of this. Of us. Of wanting something so much that losing it would break me. She brought his hand to her lips, kissing his knuckles softly. But I'm more terrified of not trying. Of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering. The car pulled up to her building, a nice brownstone in Brooklyn, safe and respectable and so far removed from his world it might as well be on another planet. Marco would sweep the area, check for threats, ensure her security before letting her exit. It was routine now, had been since the day she started working for him, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt personal. Tomorrow, Ethan said. 10 o'clock. We'll figure this out. Tomorrow, she agreed. She started to pull away, then stopped. Ethan, whatever we decide, whatever we figure out, promise me we won't lie, not to each other, not anymore. I promise. She nodded, satisfied, then slipped out of the car with a quick, "Good night, Marco," before disappearing into her building. Ethan watched until she was safely inside, until the lights in her third-floor apartment flicked on, until he was certain she was secure. "Where to, boss?" Marco asked through the partition. "Home." The drive to his penthouse in Tribeca took 20 minutes through late-night traffic. Marco swept the building as always, checking the security systems, verifying the all clear, before Ethan finally stepped into the elevator that would take him to the top floor. The penthouse was exactly as he'd left it, immaculate, expensive, and utterly impersonal. It had cost him $8 million and looked like a showroom. No photos on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that would indicate a human actually lived here rather than just existed between business meetings. Claire would hate it, he realized. She'd take one look at the sterile perfection and see it for what it was. A prison he'd built for himself. A space designed to keep the world at arm's length. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Made it home safe. Thank you for tonight. C. He stared at the message, at the casual intimacy of her signing it, with just an initial, as if they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Another text followed. Also, your penthouse needs plants, and probably some books. I'll bring some tomorrow. Despite everything, the danger, the complications, the very real possibility that this would end badly, Ethan smiled. Don't you dare bring books, he texted back. I have books. Business journals don't count. That's discrimination against business journals. That's called having taste. See you at 10. And Ethan? I'm not running. He read that last message 3 times, letting the words settle into something warm and certain in his chest. She wasn't running. Despite Eleanor's warnings, despite her own fears, despite every rational reason she had to walk away, Claire Bennett was choosing to stay. The question now was whether he was strong enough to let her. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of October day that made New Yorkers forget winter was coming and filled the streets with an almost desperate optimism. Ethan had been awake since 5, unable to sleep, his mind cycling through scenarios and contingencies the way it always did before important negotiations. Except this wasn't a negotiation. This was Claire, and nothing in his considerable experience had prepared him for the complexity of wanting something he couldn't simply take or buy or intimidate into submission. At 9:45, his phone buzzed with a text from building security. Ms. Bennett is here, sir. Send her up, he replied, then immediately second-guessed the decision to meet here, in this sterile monument to his isolation. Too late now. He heard the private elevator engage, counted the seconds it took to reach the penthouse, found himself standing in the middle of his living room like an anxious teenager, instead of a man who controlled half the criminal enterprise on the eastern seaboard. The elevator doors opened, and Claire stepped out carrying 2 coffee cups and a white bakery box, looking impossibly beautiful in jeans and a cream-colored sweater that somehow made her more devastating than the evening gown had. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of the professional makeup she wore to the office, and Ethan felt something in his chest constrict at the casual intimacy of seeing her like this. "Good morning," she said, crossing to the kitchen island and setting down her cargo. "I brought the coffee I promised, plus croissants from that French place in Soho you pretend not to like." "I don't pretend—" He stopped, seeing her knowing smile. "You're going to keep doing that, aren't you? Calling me out on things." "Absolutely. Someone needs to." She pulled out one of the bar stools, settling onto it with the ease of someone who belonged here. "Nice place, very minimalist, very, I'm too busy running an empire to have a personality. It's functional. It's depressing." She looked around, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive modern furniture, the complete absence of anything personal. You don't even have photos, not one picture of anyone or anything you care about. Security risk. Anyone who got in here could identify leverage points. Or, Claire countered, you could just not let anyone in here who might use that information against you. A novel concept, I know. She opened the bakery box, pulling out a croissant and breaking off a piece. "But we're not here to discuss your decorating choices, or lack thereof. We're here to figure out how to do this without getting killed." Blunt. Efficient. She met his eyes. "We have limited time before your world starts making demands again. Before Monday morning, when we have to go back to the office and pretend we have our act together. So let's use it wisely." Ethan moved to the island, taking the coffee she offered. "You've been thinking about this." "I haven't stopped thinking about it since yesterday." She took a sip of her own coffee, considering her words. "I made a list." "Of course you did." of all the potential problems, complications, and dangers associated with us being together. Would you like to hear it? How long is this list? 17 items. Well, 18 if you count the fact that technically I still work for you, which creates a whole host of HR issues, except you don't really have an HR department because your business doesn't exactly follow standard corporate structures. Despite the gravity of the conversation, Ethan found himself fighting a smile. You made a list of 18 reasons we shouldn't be together, and you're still here. I made a list of 18 problems we need to solve, Claire corrected. There's a difference. Problems can be managed. They can be anticipated and mitigated and planned for. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to what was presumably the actual list. Want to go through them? Why do I feel like I'm about to be hit with a very organized lecture? Because you are. I'm excellent at organized lectures. She set down her coffee. Problem 1. Power dynamics. You're my boss. That creates an inherent imbalance that could be exploited or used to invalidate my choices. Solution? I stopped being your assistant. Ethan felt that like a physical blow. Claire, let me finish. I stopped being your assistant and become something else, a consultant, a partner in the legitimate side of your business, someone with actual authority and independence rather than someone who takes orders. She held up a hand. And before you object, think about it strategically. If I have real power in your organization, if I'm seen as an equal rather than just your assistant, it's harder for enemies to dismiss me as collateral damage. It's harder for them to use me as simple leverage. He hadn't thought of it that way, had been so focused on protecting her by keeping her at a distance that he hadn't considered protection through elevation. That would put a target on your back. There's already a target on my back. I've been your assistant for 3 years. Anyone who's done their homework knows how important I am to your operations. She leaned forward. The question isn't whether I'm at risk. The question is whether I have the power and resources to defend myself when that risk materializes. You're talking about pulling you deeper into my world. I'm talking about acknowledging I'm already in it. I have been since the day I took this job. Her voice was matter of fact. I coordinate with your captains. I manage communications with people who've killed for less than an insult. I process money that comes from places we both know aren't entirely legal. The only difference now is that we're admitting there's something personal between us. Ethan circled the island, needing the movement to think. Everything she was saying made strategic sense. Elevating her position would give her protection, resources, legitimacy. But it would also make her more visible, more valuable, more tempting as a target for anyone who wanted to hurt him. What's problem 2? He asked. Claire consulted her list. Your enemies. Specifically people who will see a relationship with me as a weakness they can exploit. Like Vinnie Marconi, who according to what Castellano told you last night, is already sniffing around your operations. You heard that? I hear everything. You know that. She took another sip of coffee. Marconi's been making moves for 6 months, small things, testing boundaries, asking questions. He's looking for an opening, and the moment he finds out about us, he's going to see me as that opening. Which is exactly why we need to control the narrative before he does. Claire's tone was firm. If we hide this, if we sneak around and pretend nothing's changed, we hand him the power. He gets to reveal it on his terms, make it look sordid or weak or like you're distracted. But if we're open about it, if we frame it correctly, we take away that weapon. Open how? Controlled information release. We tell key people, your most trusted captains, important allies, people who need to know so they're not caught off guard. We frame it as a business partnership that evolved into something personal. We make it clear that I'm not a weakness, but an asset, someone who makes you stronger, not more vulnerable. Ethan studied her, this woman who'd somehow thought through the tactical implications of their relationship with the same strategic mind he applied to territorial disputes. You've really been thinking about this. I told you I haven't stopped. She set down her phone. Problem 3. My sister. Emily's a doctor, completely civilian, completely uninvolved in any of this. The moment people know about us, she becomes leverage too. I can provide security. I know you can, and will need to, but we also need to tell her what's happening before she finds out some other way. Claire's voice softened slightly. She's going to freak out. She's going to think I've lost my mind getting involved with you. But she deserves to know, and she deserves to hear it from me. When? Today. I'm meeting her for lunch. Claire checked her watch, which gives us about 3 more hours to get through the rest of this list. The casual way she said it, the assumption that he'd want to spend 3 hours planning for contingencies with her, sent another wave of warmth through his chest. This was who Claire was. Practical, strategic, facing problems head-on instead of pretending they didn't exist. What's problem 4? Your lifestyle. You work 18-hour days, you travel constantly. You have meetings at 3 in the morning and make decisions that affect thousands of lives. I need to know what you expect from me in this relationship. What normal looks like for us. I don't know, Ethan admitted. I've never done this before. Never? Not like this. There have been women, obviously, but nothing serious. Nothing that lasted more than a few months. Nothing where I let someone actually see the real me instead of just the surface. Claire's expression softened. Why me? What makes this different? Because you already know who I am. You've seen me at my worst. Angry, ruthless, making decisions that would horrify most people. And you've never flinched, never judged. You've just handled it with the same efficiency you handle everything else. He moved closer. And because somewhere along the way, probably without either of us noticing, you became the person I trusted most. The person whose opinion mattered. The person I wanted to impress. You wanted to impress me? Every single day. Still do. He reached out, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Why do you think I've been so demanding? Why I've given you the impossible projects and the complex negotiations? I wanted to see you shine. Wanted to watch you take problems that would have broken other people and turn them into victories. That's a terrible management strategy. Probably, but it worked. He let his hand linger against her cheek. You rose to every challenge, exceeded every expectation, made me better at what I do because you demanded better from me. Claire caught his hand, holding it against her face. You're not what I expected. Disappointed? Terrified, she admitted. Because you're exactly what I wanted and nothing I planned for. I thought I had my life figured out. Work hard, build a career, eventually find someone stable and safe and predictable. Instead, I fell for my boss, my dangerous, complicated, absolutely not safe or predictable boss who runs a criminal empire and looks at me like I'm something precious instead of just competent. You are precious. I'm practical. You're both. He pulled her to her feet, closing the distance between them. You're the most practical person I know, and somehow that makes you more precious, not less, because you see all the reasons this is a bad idea and you're here anyway. She kissed him, rising on her toes to eliminate the height difference, her hands sliding up to frame his face. It was softer than yesterday, less desperate, but somehow more intimate. A choice made with full knowledge instead of grabbed in a moment of weakness. When they broke apart, Claire rested her forehead against his. We have 14 more problems on my list. Later. Ethan, later, he repeated, his arms wrapping around her waist. Right now, I want to just be here with you. No strategies, no contingencies. Just this. She smiled against his chest. You're terrible at following agendas. Only yours. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the morning sun streaming through the windows and painting everything gold. It felt surreal, this domesticity, this softness. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd held someone like this, without urgency or transaction, just for the simple pleasure of contact. Tell me about your sister, he said finally. Claire pulled back enough to look at him. Why? Because she's important to you. Because she's going to be part of this, whether she wants to be or not. Because I should know the people who matter to you. Something in Claire's expression shifted, became vulnerable. Her name is Emily. She's 31, 3 years younger than me. She's a pediatric oncologist at Mount Sinai, which is exactly as heartbreaking and amazing as it sounds. She moved back to her coffee, needing something to do with her hands. When our parents died, car accident, I was 23, she was 20, I used my inheritance to put her through medical school. That's why I didn't go into law. I needed income immediately, not 3 years from now. That's how you ended up working for me. That's how I ended up working for you. Your salary was triple what any law firm would have offered a fresh graduate. The work was interesting, and you didn't ask too many questions about why someone with my credentials would want to be an assistant instead of an associate. I knew you were overqualified from the first interview. But you hired me anyway, because you were brilliant, and I needed brilliant more than I needed compliant. He studied her. Does Emily know what I really do? She knows what everyone knows, that you're a businessman with connections to organized crime, that you operate in gray areas. She doesn't know specifics, and I've kept it that way deliberately. The less she knows, the less she can be questioned about if something goes wrong. But she'll know now. If we're together, if this is real, she'll figure it out. She'll figure out enough. Claire's voice was quiet. And she's going to hate it. She's going to tell me I'm making a mistake, that I'm putting myself in danger for a man who can't possibly give me the normal life I deserve. Maybe you should listen to her. Maybe I should, Claire agreed, but I'm not going to, because she doesn't get to decide what life I deserve. I do. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. The simple certainty in her voice undid something in Ethan's chest. She was choosing him. Knowing all the complications, understanding all the risks, she was still choosing him. What about the rest of the list? He asked. We'll get to it, but first I need you to understand something. She set down her coffee, her expression serious. I'm not doing this halfway. If we're doing this, if we're really trying to make this work, then I need all of you. Not just the parts you think are safe to share, not just the controlled, measured version you show the world. I need the real you, the one who's terrified of losing control, the one who has nightmares about things from his past, the one who's not always certain he's making the right choice. That's not a very appealing package. That's the only package I'm interested in. She moved back to him, her hands on his chest. I don't want the performance, Ethan. I want the person. And that means you get the real me too. The one who's anxious about everything. The one who plans obsessively because planning makes me feel like I have control. The one who's not always as confident as I appear. I've seen that version of you. You've seen glimpses. But there's more. There's the fact that I cry at sad movies even though I pretend I don't. There's the fact that I panic clean when I'm stressed. There's the fact that sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced I've made a terrible mistake with my life and have no idea how to fix it. Claire, I'm not perfect, she interrupted. I'm not the controlled, competent assistant who never makes mistakes. I just hide it better than most people. But if we're doing this, I can't hide anymore. Not from you. The vulnerability in her voice, the raw honesty of what she was offering, made Ethan pull her close again. I don't want you to hide. Then don't you hide either. Deal? Deal. They sealed it with another kiss, slower this time, deeper. When Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming call, they both ignored it. When it buzzed again, Claire pulled back with a sigh. You should get that. It can wait. Ethan, in your world, calls on Saturday morning usually mean something's wrong. She was right. Reluctantly, he checked the screen, Marco, which meant this was business, not personal. What is it? He answered. Boss, we have a situation. Marco's voice was tight. Vinny Marconi just made a move, hit one of our warehouses in Red Hook. 3 of our guys are dead. The warmth of the morning evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold clarity that came with crisis. When? 20 minutes ago. Tony's crew is securing the scene, but we need you there. Need to send a message before this escalates. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call, already running through scenarios, calculating responses, his mind shifting into the cold tactical mode that had kept him alive for 20 years. What happened? Claire's voice was steady, professional. She'd already shifted too, he realized, already moved from the vulnerable woman sharing coffee to the strategic partner who understood crisis management. Marconi hit one of my warehouses, killed 3 of my people. This is about you refusing to back down from your shipping routes. Probably, or it's about him testing my response time, seeing if I'm distracted. He grabbed his phone, texting Marco for additional details. Either way, I need to handle this now. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Ethan, no. His voice was firm. This is exactly the kind of situation where you being there puts you at risk. If this is Marconi probing for weaknesses, I'm not giving him the satisfaction of seeing us together. I'm not painting a target on your back before we've even begun. Claire's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Fine, but you call me the moment you're clear. And you don't make any major decisions without running them by me first. Claire, this is my world. Our world, she corrected. We just spent the morning talking about being partners. Real partners. That means I don't get excluded just because things get dangerous. If anything, dangerous is when you need a strategic mind that isn't clouded by anger or the need for revenge. She was right. Frustratingly, perfectly right. Ethan had built his empire on controlled responses, on strategic thinking instead of emotional reactions. But Marconi had just killed his people, and the part of him that had clawed his way up from the streets wanted blood, not strategy. I'll call you in 2 hours, he promised. And if I'm planning anything beyond immediate security measures, I'll loop you in first. Thank you. She kissed him quickly. And Ethan, don't do anything stupid. Don't let anger make you reckless. I'm never reckless. You're reckless about things you care about. Your people. Your territory. Your pride. She held his gaze. Me. Don't let Marconi bait you into a war you don't want. He wanted to argue, to insist he had complete control over his reactions. But looking into Claire's eyes, seeing the concern there mixed with absolute certainty that she understood him better than he sometimes understood himself, he couldn't lie. I'll be careful. Good. She started gathering her things. I need to meet Emily anyway. Might as well have that lovely conversation about how I'm sleeping with my Mafia boss employer while you're dealing with actual mob violence. Should be a fun Saturday all around. Despite everything, Ethan found himself almost smiling. You're handling this remarkably well. I'm panicking internally but maintaining external composure. It's kind of my specialty. She paused at the elevator. 2 hours, Ethan. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling Marco myself. Understood. The elevator doors closed, taking Claire with them, and Ethan was alone again in his sterile penthouse. Except now it felt different. She'd been here, had brought coffee and croissants and plans for how to navigate the impossible complexity of being together. Had left traces of her presence, her coffee cup still on the counter, a croissant still in the box, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. Don't die. I have 12 more problems on my list, and I need you alive to solve them. Despite the dead bodies waiting for him in Red Hook, despite the war that might be starting, despite every rational reason to be focused solely on the crisis, Ethan smiled. Wouldn't dream of it, he texted back. You'd be very annoying about it. Damn right I would. Now go. Be terrifying but strategic. I'll talk to my sister and try to convince her you're not actually the worst decision I've ever made. Am I the worst decision you've ever made? Ask me after I survive lunch with Emily, and after you survive whatever Marconi's planning. Ethan pocketed his phone and headed for the elevator. The morning's warmth was gone, replaced by the cold focus he needed for what came next. But underneath that focus, steady and certain, was something new. He had something to come back to. Someone waiting for his call. A future that might actually be worth protecting instead of just maintaining. And God help Vinnie Marconi if he thought that made Ethan weaker instead of infinitely more dangerous. The warehouse in Red Hook was a crime scene masquerading as a business operation. Yellow police tape already fluttering in the harbor breeze by the time Ethan arrived. Marco met him at the perimeter, his expression grim, and Ethan knew immediately that the situation was worse than the initial report suggested. 3 dead, Marco confirmed, leading him past the uniforms who'd been paid to look the other way. Jimmy Greco, Tommy Stafford, and Mike Chen, all execution style, single shots to the back of the head. Professional. Ethan felt the familiar coldness settle over him, the emotional distance that allowed him to process violence without being consumed by it. He'd known Jimmy for 15 years, had watched Tommy grow from a street kid into a reliable soldier, had personally recruited Mike after the man saved his nephew from a robbery. They weren't just employees, they were his people. And Marconi had executed them like they meant nothing. Witnesses? Ethan asked, his voice flat. 1. Carlos was doing rounds outside when the hit went down. Heard the shots, came running, saw 3 men leaving. He got a partial plate on their vehicle before they disappeared. Where's Carlos now? Safe house in Queens. Waiting for your call. Marco hesitated. Boss, there's something else. They left a message. Of course they did. Men like Marconi didn't just kill people. They made statements, sent warnings, started conversations written in blood. Marco led him into the warehouse, past the covered bodies that Ethan refused to look at yet, to the back office where someone had spray-painted a message across the wall in red. Time to renegotiate, Morelli. Ethan stared at the words, his mind working through implications and responses. This wasn't about the warehouse or the shipping routes. This was about power. Marconi was testing him, seeing if he'd react with emotion or strategy, violence or negotiation. The wrong response would make him look weak. The right response would prevent a war. The question was which response was which. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. How bad? Bad enough. 3 dead. Message left. What kind of message? The kind that demands a response. There was a pause, then, don't respond angry. Respond smart. He almost smiled despite the circumstances. She was right, of course. Anger was exactly what Marconi wanted. Anger made people sloppy, predictable, easy to manipulate. And Ethan hadn't survived 20 years in this world by being predictable. Get me everything on Marconi's recent movements, Ethan told Marco. Every meeting, every phone call, every transaction. I want to know what he's planning before he knows himself. Already working on it. Tony's reaching out to our sources inside his organization. Good. And Marco? Double security on all our locations. Every warehouse, every front, every person who matters. If Marconi wants to start something, I want to know about it before the first shot is fired. What about retaliation? The crew's going to want blood for this. They would. That's how this world worked. You killed mine, I killed yours, the cycle continuing until someone blinked or died. But Ethan was tired of that game, tired of solving problems with violence when strategy could work better. Tell the crew to stand down. No moves without my explicit approval. Marco's eyebrows rose. Boss, if we don't hit back hard, people are going to think that I'm weak? Let them think it. Marconi's expecting retaliation. He's probably got his people on high alert, waiting for us to make a move so he can justify escalating. We don't give him that satisfaction. Then what do? We find out what he really wants. Why now? Why this way? Why risk starting a war when the last year's been relatively peaceful? Ethan turned from the spray-painted message. Someone's pushing him. Someone wants me distracted or weakened or drawn into a conflict. I want to know who. His phone rang. Not Claire this time, but Richard Castellano. Ethan answered, already knowing this wouldn't be good news. Heard about the warehouse, Castellano said without preamble. Unfortunate business. Is that what we're calling murder now? Unfortunate business? Marconi's making noise, saying you've been encroaching on his territory, saying he tried to resolve things peacefully, but you refused to negotiate. That's bullshit, and you know it. What I know is that I'm getting calls from people who want to know if there's about to be a war. People who have interests in maintaining stability. Castellano's voice hardened. People who won't appreciate their investments being threatened because you and Marconi can't play nice. I'm not the one who started this. Doesn't matter who started it, matters who ends it. There was a pause. Meet with him. Hear what he wants. Find a solution that doesn't involve body bags and federal attention. You're asking me to negotiate with the man who just killed 3 of my people? I'm asking you to be smart. To remember that this world operates on more than just pride and revenge. Castellano's tone softened slightly. Ethan, I've known you for 15 years. You're better than this. Better than the hot-headed kid who fought his way up from Brooklyn. You've built something sustainable, something that could last. Don't throw it away because Marconi poked you. The words landed harder than they should have, because underneath the reasonable advice was an implication that stung, that Ethan was acting on emotion instead of logic, that he was letting this become personal when it should stay business, that he was letting Claire's influence make him soft. I'll consider it, Ethan said finally. Consider it fast. These things have a way of spiraling if you're not careful. Castellano hung up. Ethan stood in the warehouse, surrounded by evidence of violence, feeling the weight of decisions pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed for retaliation, for making Marconi pay in blood for what he'd done, for sending a message that would echo through the city, "You don't touch Ethan Morelli's people," and walk away. But Claire's words echoed louder. "Don't let anger make you reckless." His phone buzzed again. Another text from her. "Meeting Emily now. She says you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid for getting involved with me. I told her jury's still out." "How are you?" "Trying to decide between smart and satisfying. Always choose smart. Satisfying is temporary. Smart keeps you alive." "When did you get so wise?" "Law school. Also 3 years of watching you make decisions. I learned from the best." He stared at the message, at the casual way she'd just called him the best, and felt something shift. She believed in him, in his judgment, his strategy, his ability to choose the right path even when the easy path beckoned. He couldn't let her down. "Marco," Ethan said, pocketing his phone, "set up a meeting with Marconi. Neutral location. Tomorrow afternoon." "You're actually going to sit down with him?" "I'm going to hear what he wants. Doesn't mean I'm giving it to him. But I need to understand the play before I counter it." Marco looked skeptical but nodded. "I'll make the arrangements. What about Jimmy and the others? Families need to be notified." "I'll handle it personally." It was the least he could do. The least he owed the men who'd died in his service. "Get me their addresses. I'll visit each family tonight." "Boss, that's not necessary." "It's absolutely necessary." Ethan's voice was firm. "They died working for me. Their families deserve to hear about it from me, not some soldier they barely know." He spent the next several hours at the warehouse, coordinating cleanup and security measures, talking to his crew, managing the careful balance between showing strength and avoiding escalation. By the time he left, the sun was setting over the harbor, painting the industrial landscape in shades of orange and gold that felt obscenely beautiful given the day's violence. His phone showed 5 missed calls from Claire and a string of increasingly concerned texts. "You said 2 hours. It's been 4. Call me." "Ethan, I'm serious. I need to know you're okay. If you're dead, I'm going to be very upset. Also, I told Emily you weren't stupid, so don't make me a liar. Marco just texted saying you're fine, but handling things. That's not the same as you texting. Use your own fingers." "Fine." "I'm calling Marco again. Prepare for me to be annoying." He called her instead, and she answered on the first ring. 4.5 hours, Ethan. We agreed on 2. "I know. I'm sorry. Things were more complicated than expected." "Are you hurt?" Her voice shifted from annoyed to concerned in an instant. "No, I'm fine. Just dealing with cleanup and arrangements." He climbed into the back of his car, nodding for Marco to drive. "How was lunch with Emily?" "Terrible. She thinks I've lost my mind. She also threatened to perform very specific medical procedures on you if you get me killed, so congratulations. You've made an excellent first impression on my sister." Despite everything, Ethan found himself almost smiling. "I look forward to meeting her." "No, you don't. She's terrifying when she's in protective big sister mode. Well, younger sister playing protective older sister because I raised her." Claire paused. "Are you really okay?" Marco's text was very sparse on details. 3 dead. Message left. Marconi wants to renegotiate our arrangement. "Are you meeting with him?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Neutral location. I'm going to hear him out." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "I'm proud of you." The words hit him unexpectedly hard. For what? For choosing strategy over revenge, for being smart instead of reactive, for being exactly the man I knew you could be instead of the man Marconi wants you to be. "I haven't decided anything yet, haven't committed to any course of action. But you're thinking instead of just acting. That's progress." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Where are you now?" "Heading to visit the families. Jimmy, Tommy, and Mike all had people who need to know what happened." "Do you want company?" The offer surprised him. "Claire, you don't need to." "I know I don't need to. I'm asking if you want me there. Because this is the part nobody sees, isn't it? The part where you have to look people in the eye and tell them someone they love isn't coming home. The part where you carry the weight of those deaths alone." Her voice was gentle. "You don't have to be alone for this. Not anymore." He closed his eyes, leaning back against the leather seat, feeling the full weight of the day pressing down on him. 3 men dead, families destroyed. A war potentially starting, and Claire offering to stand beside him through the hardest part. Yes, he admitted, I want you there. Where should I meet you? He gave her Jimmy's address in Brooklyn, then hung up and stared out the window as the city slid past. Marco caught his eye in the rearview mirror. She's good for you, boss. What makes you say that? You're thinking long-term instead of short-term, making strategic decisions instead of emotional ones. Marco navigated through traffic. Last year, if someone hit one of our locations and killed our people, you'd have already ordered retaliation. Today you're setting up a meeting. That's growth. Or weakness. It's not weakness to want something worth protecting besides just your reputation. Marco's voice was matter-of-fact. You've been building toward legitimacy for years, building real businesses, real power that doesn't rely on violence. Claire fits into that vision. War with Marconi doesn't. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to residential neighborhoods, the wealthy enclaves of Manhattan replaced by the working-class streets of Brooklyn where Ethan had grown up, where Jimmy Greco had lived with his wife and 2 daughters. Claire was waiting on the corner when they arrived, looking somehow both out of place and exactly right in her jeans and sweater among the modest brownstones. She climbed into the car without hesitation, settling beside Ethan and taking his hand. You didn't have to come, he said quietly. Yes, I did. She squeezed his hand. What do I need to know? Jimmy was 43, wife named Maria, daughters aged 16 and 13. He'd worked for me for 15 years. Good man, loyal, never questioned orders, never caused problems. How much are you giving the family? The question was practical, expected from someone who handled his finances. $500,000, plus college funds for both girls, plus Maria keeps her health insurance and gets a pension. That's generous. It's inadequate. His voice was rough. No amount of money replaces a father, but it's what I can offer. They walked to the door together, Claire's hand in his, and when Maria Greco answered, already knowing somehow, the way wives always knew when their husbands weren't coming home, it was Claire who caught her when she collapsed, who helped her to the couch, who made tea while Ethan sat with the woman and told her what had happened. He was a good man, Ethan said, holding Maria's shaking hands. One of the best people I've ever known. This shouldn't have happened. It's my fault it did. Don't. Maria's voice was thick with tears but surprisingly firm. Don't you dare take that on. Jimmy knew what he signed up for, knew the risks. He chose this life because you gave him opportunities nobody else would, because you saw something in a kid from the neighborhood when everyone else just saw another statistic. She wiped at her eyes. He loved you, loved working for you, said you were the kind of man worth following. The words landed like blows, each one a reminder of the responsibility Ethan carried, the trust people placed in him, the lives that depended on his decisions. Claire appeared with tea, her presence quiet but steady, and Ethan watched her move through the room with the same grace she brought to business meetings. She knew exactly what to say, how to listen, when to offer comfort, and when to simply sit in solidarity with grief. They stayed for an hour, making sure Maria had everything she needed, that family was coming to support her, that she understood about the money and the benefits, and the fact that Ethan would personally ensure her daughters had every opportunity their father would have wanted for them. When they finally left, stepping back into the cool evening air, Ethan felt hollowed out in a way violence never accomplished. Killing enemies was easy. Facing the consequences of your decisions, looking into the eyes of people who'd lost someone because of you, that was the hard part. 2 more families, he said quietly. Then we visit 2 more families. Claire's hand found his again. Together. They did. Tommy Stafford's mother, a widow who'd already buried her husband and now had to bury her son. Mike Chen's pregnant wife, who just found out that morning that she was having a boy and now had to face raising him alone. Each visit was its own kind of devastation. Each one reminded Ethan of the human cost of his world, the price paid by people who didn't make the decisions but suffered the consequences. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. Marco drove them back to Manhattan in silence, the city lights blurring past like tears, and Ethan sat with Claire's hand in his, grateful beyond words that she was there. Your place or mine? Claire asked as they approached her neighborhood. You don't have to. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. Her voice was firm. Not after this. So, your place or mine? Yours. He needed to be somewhere that felt lived in, human, real. Somewhere that wasn't the sterile perfection of his penthouse. Claire's apartment was everything his wasn't. Warm, cluttered, full of books and photos, and the accumulated evidence of a life actually being lived. She made him sit on her worn but comfortable couch while she made tea, then settled beside him with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. You did good tonight, she said quietly. I got 3 men killed. You took responsibility for it. You faced their families. You made sure they'd be taken care of. She set down her tea, turning to face him. A lot of men in your position would have sent someone else, would have written a check and called it handled. You didn't. Doesn't bring them back. No, but it matters to their families, to your crew, to everyone who works for you and needs to know that if something happens to them, you'll treat their people right. She reached up, her hand gentle against his face. This is the part nobody sees, isn't it? The weight you carry, the cost of every decision. It's the job. It's more than that. It's who you are. Her thumb brushed across his cheek, and Ethan realized with some surprise that his face was wet. He was crying. When had he started crying? You're allowed to feel this, Ethan. You're allowed to grieve for them. If I start, I won't stop. Then don't stop. Not tonight. Not with me. She pulled him close, his head against her shoulder, and Ethan let himself break in a way he never had before. Let the grief and guilt and overwhelming weight of responsibility pour out in harsh, ugly sobs that shook his entire body. Claire held him through it, her hands gentle in his hair, her voice murmuring comfort he couldn't quite hear but felt in his bones. She didn't tell him it wasn't his fault, didn't offer platitudes or false reassurances. She just held him while he fell apart, offering the kind of unconditional acceptance he'd never experienced before. Eventually, the storm passed. Ethan pulled back, wiping at his face, feeling raw and exposed and somehow lighter than he had in years. Sorry, he muttered. Don't apologize, not for this, not ever. Claire brushed his hair back from his forehead. This is the real you, remember? The one you promised to show me. The one who feels things and hurts and carries impossible weight. This is exactly who I signed up for. I'm a mess. You're human. There's a difference. She smiled softly. And for what it's worth, I think I might be falling in love with the mess. The words hung in the air between them, huge and terrifying and impossibly perfect. Claire, you don't have to say it back. I know it's too soon. I know we're still figuring this out. But after today, after watching you with those families, after seeing you choose strategy over revenge and responsibility over ego, I needed you to know. She took his hand. I'm falling in love with you, Ethan Morelli, with all of you, the brilliant strategist and the grieving boss, the powerful man and the vulnerable human, all of it. Ethan stared at her, this extraordinary woman who'd somehow seen past every wall he'd built, every defense he'd erected, and chosen to love him anyway, who'd stood beside him through the worst day he'd had in years and offered comfort instead of judgment. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. She pulled him to his feet. Come on, you're staying tonight. I'll take the couch. You take the bed. I'm not taking your bed. Then we'll both take the bed. I trust you not to be a creep about it. She led him to her bedroom, small and cozy and smelling like her perfume. Besides, I think we've both had enough emotional devastation for one day. Sleep sounds pretty good right now. They lay down together, still fully dressed, Claire's head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. It was intimate without being sexual, comfortable in a way that felt like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Tomorrow, you meet with Marconi, Claire said into the darkness. Tomorrow, I meet with Marconi. Promise me you'll be smart. Promise me you won't let him provoke you into something stupid. I promise. And promise me you'll come back. Because I meant what I said. I'm falling in love with you, and I'm going to be very upset if you get yourself killed before I finish the process. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. I promise that too. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Good. Now sleep. Tomorrow we deal with mobsters and territorial disputes. Tonight, we just exist. He held her closer, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat steady against his side. For the first time in 20 years, Ethan Morelli fell asleep feeling something other than alone. And when nightmares came, visions of Jimmy and Tommy and Mike, of Maria's tears and Mrs. Stafford's devastation, and the way Mike's wife had touched her pregnant belly like she could protect their son from a world that had just taken his father, Claire was there, holding him, reminding him he didn't have to carry this weight alone anymore. Tomorrow he'd face Marconi. Tomorrow he'd make decisions that could prevent or start a war. Tomorrow he'd be the powerful, controlled mafia boss everyone expected. But tonight, in Claire Bennett's small Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by books and warmth and unconditional acceptance, Ethan was just a man who'd finally found someone worth being vulnerable for. And that made all the difference. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through Claire's curtains, and for a disoriented moment, Ethan forgot where he was. Then he felt the weight of her head on his shoulder, the gentle rhythm of her breathing, and remembered. He'd spent the night in her bed, fully clothed, holding her while the city slept, and the weight of yesterday's violence slowly settled into something he could carry. Claire stirred, her eyes opening slowly, and when she focused on him, a small smile curved her lips. "You're still here? Where else would I be? I don't know. Part of me expected you to disappear in the night, to wake up and find this was all some exhaustion-induced hallucination." She stretched, wincing slightly. "We're too old to sleep in our clothes." "Speak for yourself." "You're 42, Ethan. That counts as old enough to know better." She sat up, running her fingers through her tangled hair. "What time is the meeting with Marconi?" 3:00. Castellano's restaurant in Little Italy. Neutral ground. "That gives us time." She checked her phone, scrolling through messages. "Emily texted, wants to meet you. Says if I'm really doing this, she needs to assess the damage for herself." That sounds ominous. That's Emily. Protective to the point of being invasive. Claire set down her phone. "You don't have to meet her. Not today. Not with everything else happening." "I want to." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. "If we're doing this, if we're really trying to make this work, I should meet the people who matter to you. Besides, I need to know exactly what medical procedures she threatened me with." Claire laughed, the sound lighter than it had any right to be given the circumstances. "She was very specific, something about a scalpel and your kneecaps if you make me cry." "Noted. I'll avoid making you cry." They moved through the morning with surprising ease, falling into a rhythm that felt natural despite its newness. Claire made coffee while Ethan checked messages from Marco, coordinating security and confirming the meeting logistics. They shared breakfast at her small kitchen table, and Ethan found himself watching her, memorizing the way she looked in the morning light. No makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing an oversized Columbia sweatshirt that had probably belonged to someone else before her. "What?" she asked, catching him staring. "Nothing. Just thinking this is nice." "This? Terrible coffee and stale bagels?" "This? Normal. Domestic." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I've never had this. Never wanted it, really. Always seemed like a weakness. Something that would make me vulnerable. And now? Now I think maybe vulnerability isn't the worst thing. Maybe having something worth protecting is better than having nothing to lose." Claire squeezed his hand. "That's very philosophical for someone who has to negotiate with a rival mob boss in 6 hours. Maybe that's why I'm being philosophical. Facing mortality tends to make people contemplative. You're not going to die today." "You sound very certain of that." "I am. Because I told you not to, and you promised to come back." She stood, moving around the table to settle into his lap. "Besides, Marconi doesn't want you dead. If he wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. He wants something else. Wants to leverage this situation into a better position for himself. And you know this how? Because I've been reading everything I can find about territorial disputes and mob negotiations since yesterday. Also because it's basic psychology. People don't leave spray-painted messages asking to renegotiate if they just want blood. They want concessions. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer. You've been researching mob psychology? I've been researching how to keep you alive. Same thing. She kissed him softly. So when you meet with Marconi, remember that he's posturing, testing you, looking for weaknesses. Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing you angry or desperate. Be exactly who you are, calm, strategic, and utterly in control. Even if I'm not feeling particularly in control? Especially then. That's when the performance matters most. She pulled back to look at him. You've been doing this for 20 years, Ethan. You know how to play this game. I'm just reminding you not to let emotion override strategy. He studied her face, this woman who'd somehow become essential to his existence in the span of a few days. When did you get so good at managing me? I've been managing you for 3 years. You're just now noticing. She stood, pulling him to his feet. Come on, we need to get you home so you can change before meeting Emily. I love you, but you can't meet my sister looking like you slept in your clothes. The casual way she said I love you, like it was already established fact rather than new territory, made something warm bloom in Ethan's chest. You said that so easily. Said what? That you love me. Claire paused, considering. I did, didn't I? I guess after last night, after watching you with those families, after seeing you be completely human and vulnerable, it stopped being something I was falling into and became something I just am. I love you. Present tense, established fact. She tilted her head. Is that a problem? No. It's terrifying and perfect and completely insane given our circumstances. But it's not a problem. He pulled her close again, needing the contact. I love you too. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between you bringing me coffee and you calling me out on my bullshit and you standing beside me through the worst day I've had in years, I fell in love with you. She smiled against his chest. Well, that's inconvenient timing. You're about to walk into a potentially dangerous meeting, and I'm going to spend the whole time worried about you instead of focused on charming your sister. My sister? Your future sister-in-law, technically. Emily's going to be insufferable about this. But she was smiling, and Ethan realized she was imagining a future, one where they lasted long enough for family dynamics to matter, one where this insane relationship actually worked. He wanted that future more than he'd wanted anything in his life. They returned to his penthouse so he could change, and Claire made good on her threat to bring plants, producing 2 small succulents from her bag. They're nearly impossible to kill, she explained, setting them on his kitchen counter. Even you can keep these alive. I'm not that bad at taking care of things. You have 0 personal items in this entire penthouse. 0 photos, 0 mementos, 0 evidence that a human lives here. So yes, you're that bad. She surveyed the space with a critical eye. We're going to fix this. Slowly. Make this place feel less like a hotel and more like a home. We? We. As in both of us. As in I'm planning to spend time here and I refuse to do it in a sterile museum. She moved to him, straightening his tie. Unless you'd prefer I didn't? I prefer you did. I prefer you here, making plans to redecorate my life. He caught her hands. I prefer everything about this. About you. About us. Good. Then let's go meet Emily before I get too comfortable and decide to skip it entirely. They met Emily at a small cafe in the West Village, and Ethan recognized her immediately. She had Claire's eyes and the same determined set to her jaw, though where Claire was controlled and strategic, Emily radiated barely contained energy. So you're him, Emily said without preamble, looking Ethan up and down with undisguised assessment. The Mafia boss my sister has apparently lost her mind over. Emily, Claire warned. What? I'm just stating facts. Emily turned her attention to Ethan. Sit. We need to have a conversation. Ethan sat, amused despite himself. Emily Bennett was exactly as advertised, terrifying and protective and utterly unimpressed by his reputation. I'm going to be direct, Emily said once they'd ordered coffee. I don't like this. I don't like that my sister is getting involved with someone who operates outside the law. I don't like that she's putting herself in danger. And I especially don't like that she's in love with you, because that means I can't just tell her to walk away and expect her to listen. Emily, let me finish. Emily's gaze never left Ethan. But Claire is a grown woman who makes her own decisions, and she's also the smartest person I know. So if she's choosing you, if she's looked at all the risks and complications and decided you're worth it, then I have to trust her judgment. She leaned forward. That said, if you get her killed, if you break her heart, if you make her regret this choice, I will destroy you. I don't care how powerful you are or how many people you have working for you. I will find a way to make you suffer in ways you can't imagine. Are we clear? Crystal clear, Ethan said, respecting her directness. For what it's worth, I have no intention of getting her killed or breaking her heart. But I appreciate you being protective of her. She deserves people who look out for her. She does. She spent most of her life looking out for other people, me included. It's nice that someone's finally looking out for her. Emily's expression softened slightly. She raised me, you know. When our parents died, she was 23 and I was 20. She could have let me figure it out on my own, focused on her own career. Instead, she put me through medical school. Sacrificed her own plans so I could have mine. I know, she told me. Then you know she's the kind of person who puts everyone else first, who takes care of people even when it costs her. Emily's voice was firm. I need to know you're not going to take advantage of that you're not going to let her sacrifice herself for you. I'm not. In fact, I'm trying to figure out how to make sure she doesn't. Ethan met Emily's eyes. I love your sister. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. And I'm terrified that being with me will cost her everything. But she's made it very clear that my fear doesn't get to make decisions for her. Good. She should make her own decisions. Emily sat back, some of the intensity fading. Okay, you're not completely terrible. I still think this is a bad idea, but at least you seem aware of the problems. Very aware. And you're meeting with Vinnie Marconi this afternoon? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Claire told you about that? I told her everything, Claire interjected. Emily's my person. I don't keep secrets from her. Marconi's dangerous, Emily said. I've treated 3 of his victims in the ER. People who crossed him and paid for it. You need to be careful. I'm always careful. Be more than careful today. Emily glanced at her sister. Because Claire's going to be a wreck until you're back safe, and I'm the one who'll have to deal with her anxiety spiraling. I don't spiral, Claire protested. You absolutely spiral. You just hide it well. Emily stood, checking her watch. I have to get to the hospital. My shift starts in an hour. But Ethan, thank you for meeting me, and for making my sister happy. Just don't make me regret not talking her out of this. I'll do my best. Emily hugged Claire tightly, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear, then left with a final warning look in his direction. Well, Claire said once her sister was gone, that went better than expected. She threatened to destroy me. That's Emily being friendly. When she's actually mad, she gets very quiet and starts plotting. Claire checked her phone. You have 2 hours before the meeting. What do you need? I need you to not be there. Her expression tightened. Ethan, I know we talked about being partners, about doing this together, but this meeting is too unpredictable, too potentially violent. I need to know you're safe while I'm dealing with Marconi. And I need to know you're not walking into danger alone. I won't be alone. Marco and 3 others will be with me. But Claire, if things go wrong, if Marconi decides to escalate instead of negotiate, I can't be thinking about protecting you. I need to be focused entirely on the situation. She was quiet for a long moment, clearly fighting the urge to argue. Fine, but you call me the moment you're clear, and you don't make any major decisions without talking to me first. Agreed. And Ethan, if Marconi wants concessions, don't give them to him out of guilt about yesterday. 3 men dying doesn't mean you owe him anything. It means he owes you accountability. You think I should go in hard? I think you should go in smart. Figure out what he really wants, what's driving this, and then decide if negotiation or confrontation serves you better. She stood, moving to him. Just come back to me. That's all I care about. He kissed her, pouring everything he felt into the contact. Love and fear and gratitude that she existed, that she'd chosen him, that she made him want to be better than the man he'd been. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you too. Now go. Be terrifying but strategic. The meeting location was exactly what Ethan expected. Castellano's restaurant, an old-school Italian place in Little Italy that served as neutral territory for exactly these kinds of negotiations. Marconi was already there when Ethan arrived, sitting in a back booth with 2 of his men flanking him. Vinnie Marconi was 55, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed the coldness in his eyes. He stood when Ethan approached, offering a hand that Ethan shook, despite every instinct screaming at him not to. "Morelli, thanks for coming. You killed 3 of my people. I figured the least I could do was hear you out before I responded appropriately." Ethan slid into the booth across from him, Marco standing nearby, watchful. "Unfortunate business that, but necessary to get your attention." Marconi poured wine from the bottle on the table. "You've been ignoring my attempts at communication. Had to escalate. You could have called." "I did call. Multiple times. You didn't return them." Marconi sipped his wine. "You've been distracted lately. Word is you're involved with your assistant. That true?" Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed, but he kept his expression neutral. "My personal life is none of your concern. It is when it affects business. When it makes you sloppy." Marconi leaned forward. "See, I've been watching you, Ethan. You've built something impressive. Transitioned from pure muscle to legitimate business without losing your edge. It's admirable. But lately you've been making mistakes, getting soft. And that creates opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "The kind where territories get renegotiated, where shipping routes get redistributed, where power changes hands." Marconi's smile was cold. "I want the Red Hook routes, the Brooklyn docks, 20% of your East Coast distribution." "That's not negotiation, that's extortion. Call it what you want. Point is, you're vulnerable right now. Your crew's rattled after yesterday. Your attention's divided. And me? I'm hungry. So you can give me what I want peacefully, or we can do this the hard way." Ethan sat back, studying Marconi, reading the tells, the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers drummed on the table, the fact that he'd brought only 2 men instead of a full crew. He was projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Who's pushing you?" Ethan asked quietly. "What?" "This isn't your play. You're not this aggressive normally. You've been content with your territory for 5 years. So who convinced you this was a good idea? Who told you I was vulnerable?" Marconi's expression flickered, and Ethan knew he'd hit the truth. There was someone else. Someone using Marconi as a weapon against him. Doesn't matter who, it matters to me. Because here's what I think is happening. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "I think someone fed you information, told you I was distracted, convinced you that now was the time to make a move. And I think you believed them without doing your own homework, without considering that maybe this was a setup." "A setup?" "To start a war. To get both of us fighting while whoever's pulling the strings benefits from the chaos." Ethan pulled out his phone, showing Marconi photos that Marco had compiled overnight. "These are pictures of your nephew meeting with Castellano's people 3 times in the last month. Want to guess what they were discussing?" Marconi's face went pale. "Richie wouldn't... Richie's ambitious. Wants to move up faster than you're letting him. So he made a deal. Convinces you to go after me, provides Castellano with information on both our operations. And when we've weakened each other enough, Castellano steps in and takes over both territories." Ethan put away his phone. "You're being played, Vinny. Just like whoever's been feeding you information wanted." The silence stretched, Marconi processing, his men shifting uncomfortably. Finally, Marconi spoke, his voice rough. "If what you're saying is true, it's true. I've got bank records, meeting transcripts, everything you need to verify it yourself." Ethan kept his tone level. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your organization and handle your nephew problem. I'm going to handle Castellano, and we're going to forget yesterday happened." "You're letting me walk away? After I killed your people?" "I'm choosing to end this before it becomes something that destroys us both. My people are dead. That can't be undone. But I can prevent more deaths, more families destroyed, more chaos that serves everyone except us." Ethan stood. "But Vinny, if you ever come at me again, if you ever threaten what's mine or kill my people, I won't be this generous. Are we clear?" Marconi nodded slowly. "Clear." "Good. Now get out, and think very carefully about who you trust going forward." Ethan watched Marconi leave, his men trailing behind, then turned to Marco. "Get me everything on Castellano, every meeting, every deal, every communication. I want to know exactly how deep this goes. You think he orchestrated all of this? I think he saw an opportunity and took it. Used Marconi to test me, to see if I was really distracted or if it was just appearance. Ethan headed for the exit, and I think he's about to learn that mistake was costly. His phone rang. Claire. He answered immediately. I'm fine. Meeting's over. Marconi's not the real problem. Who is? Castellano. He's been playing both sides, trying to engineer a war so he could sweep in and claim territory from both of us. What are you going to do? End it. Permanently. He climbed into the car, Marco driving. Where are you? Your place. I let myself in. Hope that's okay. It's more than okay. The thought of Claire in his penthouse, making herself at home in his space, filled him with warmth. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Ethan? Be careful with Castellano. He's smarter than Marconi. More connected. I know, but I'm smarter, and I'm done playing his games. He hung up and turned to Marco. Call a meeting. All the captains. Tonight. We're restructuring some alliances and cutting ties with people who can't be trusted. Castellano's not going to take that well. He doesn't have a choice. By the time we're done, he won't have the leverage to object. Ethan pulled out his phone, already composing messages to key allies. And Marco? Double security on Claire. If Castellano realizes I'm cutting him out, he might try to use her as leverage. Already done, boss. Tony's team has been on her since this morning. When Ethan finally made it back to his penthouse, he found Claire exactly where she said she'd be, curled up on his couch with a book, her shoes kicked off, looking more at home than he'd ever felt in this space. She looked up when he entered, setting aside the book. You're alive. I'm alive. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Marconi's handled. Castellano's next. How bad is the Castellano situation? Bad enough that I'm burning a 15-year relationship, but necessary. He settled onto the couch, pulling her into his lap. He orchestrated this whole thing, fed Marconi information, convinced him I was vulnerable, planned to benefit from both of us fighting. So what's the plan? I'm calling in favors, cutting off his support. By tomorrow, Castellano will be isolated with no allies and no leverage. Then I'm offering him a choice, retire quietly and keep his life, or fight and lose everything. Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers playing with his collar. This is your world. Yes. Manipulation and power plays and destroying people who betray you. Yes. And you're good at it. Very good at it. She looked at him, her expression serious. Does it bother you that I'm seeing this side? The ruthless strategist instead of the grieving boss who visited families? I'm both. I'm all of it. He caught her hand, holding it against his chest. I'm the man who cried in your arms last night, and the man who's about to dismantle another man's empire. I'm the person who loves you, and the person who's killed people who threaten what's mine. You said you wanted all of me. This is part of that. I know. She leaned her forehead against his. And I'm not going anywhere. Just making sure you know that I see you, all of you. And I'm choosing this anyway. Even though it's complicated and dangerous and morally gray, especially because of that. Because you're real. Because you don't pretend to be something you're not. She kissed him softly. I spent my whole life trying to be perfect, trying to make the right choices, do the responsible thing, and it made me competent but not particularly happy. You make me happy, Ethan. Even when you're destroying your enemies and restructuring your empire. Maybe especially then because you let me see it, let me be part of it. He held her tighter, this extraordinary woman who somehow made his chaotic, violent world feel like something he could navigate with her beside him. I love you. I love you too. Now tell me about this meeting you're calling. What do you need from me? They spent the next several hours planning, strategizing, Claire's sharp mind helping him see angles he might have missed. She understood power dynamics, understood leverage and manipulation in ways that made her invaluable. And more than that, she understood him, knew when to push and when to support, when to offer strategy and when to just listen. By the time the captains arrived for the evening meeting, Ethan had his plan fully formed. Marco, Tony, and 8 others filed into the penthouse, and Ethan laid out the situation, Castellano's betrayal, the evidence they'd compiled, the response they'd execute. We cut all ties, Ethan said, his voice firm. No more joint ventures, no more shared territory, no more coordination. Castellano becomes a non-entity in our operations. He's not going to accept that, Tony said. He'll fight back. Let him try. By tomorrow morning, every major player in the city will know what he did, know that he can't be trusted, know that aligning with him means making an enemy of me. Ethan looked around the room. I've built this organization on loyalty and smart strategy. Castellano violated both. He goes down. Are we clear? The response was unanimous. They were with him. After the meeting ended and his people dispersed, Ethan found Claire waiting in his bedroom, having given him space for the business discussion. She was wearing one of his shirts, her legs bare, and the sight of her in his space, in his clothes, made something possessive and tender bloom in his chest. How'd it go? She asked. They're with me. Castellano's finished. He started unbuttoning his shirt, exhausted from the day. Tomorrow I make the calls, end this permanently. And then? And then I figure out how to run an empire with you beside me instead of behind me. He pulled her close. I meant what I said about making you a partner, real power, real authority. Not just my assistant, but my equal. That's going to ruffle some feathers. Let them ruffle. You've earned it. You're smarter than half my captains and more strategic than all of them. He cupped her face. Besides, I'm selfish. I want you with me. Want to build something together that's bigger than just territory and power. Want to create something legitimate that lasts. You're talking about the future. I'm talking about our future, if you want it. Claire smiled, that brilliant, warm smile that still had the power to undo him. I want it. I want to build something with you. I want to turn your empire into something sustainable and legitimate. I want to wake up in your bed and argue about strategy and make you better while you make me braver. She pulled him down to her. I want all of it, Ethan. Every complicated, dangerous, beautiful piece of it. He kissed her, pouring everything he felt into the contact. Love and gratitude and wonder that she existed, that she'd chosen him, that she made him believe in futures instead of just surviving the present. They made love that night with a tenderness that surprised them both, mapping each other's bodies with gentle hands and whispered promises. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in his bed, Ethan felt something he'd never experienced before. Peace. The next morning, Ethan made his calls, reached out to every major player, every alliance that mattered, and explained exactly what Castellano had done. By noon, Castellano was isolated. By evening, he'd agreed to meet. They met at the same restaurant where Ethan had confronted Marconi, but this time there was no pretense of negotiation. Castellano knew he'd lost before he sat down. You could have called, Castellano said, his voice tired. Could have talked to me before burning 15 years of partnership. You could have not tried to engineer a war between me and Marconi for your own benefit. Ethan's voice was cold. You crossed a line. Killed people for profit. You don't get courtesy after that. So what now? You're offering me retirement. I'm offering you your life. Retire. Sell your operations to people I approve. Move somewhere warm and quiet, and we never speak again. And if I refuse, then I bury you completely. I've already got the support lined up. Already got people ready to carve up your territory the moment you're gone. Ethan leaned forward. You taught me a lot over the years, Richard. Taught me to be strategic, to think long-term, to always have leverage, so thank you for that. But you also taught me never to trust anyone completely. And that lesson? That's the one I'm applying now. Castellano stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Retirement it is. I'll have my lawyers contact you about the sales. Good choice. Ethan stood. And Richard, if you ever come back, if you ever threaten me or mine again, there won't be a conversation. There'll just be a funeral. Understood? Understood. Ethan walked out of the restaurant feeling lighter than he had in days. The threat was neutralized. His organization was secure. And Claire was waiting for him at a small cafe 3 blocks away, pretending to read a book while actually watching for him. Done? She asked when he slid into the seat across from her. Done. Castellano's retiring. Crisis averted. Just like that? Just like that. Turns out when you control the leverage and the alliances, people tend to see reason. He reached across the table, taking her hand. We're free, Claire. free to build something better, free to be together without looking over our shoulders constantly. There'll always be something to look over our shoulders about. That's the nature of your world. Our world, he corrected. And you're right, but at least now we can focus on building instead of just defending. She smiled, that brilliant expression that still made his heart race. So what are we building? A life, a real partnership, something that makes us both better. He stood, pulling her to her feet. Starting with dinner at a real restaurant, where we don't have to pretend we're not together, where I can actually hold your hand and not worry about who's watching. That sounds perfect. They walked through the city hand in hand, and for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Morelli wasn't performing, wasn't calculating, wasn't maintaining distance or building walls. He was just a man in love, walking beside the woman who'd somehow made him believe that happiness was possible. 3 months later, they returned to Raphael's, the restaurant where jealousy had first cracked open Ethan's carefully controlled world. They sat at the same table by the window where Claire had been on that fateful date, but this time there was no pretense, no hidden feelings, no desperate need to maintain professional boundaries. "I've been thinking," Claire said, toying with her wine glass, "about that list I made, the 18 problems we needed to solve. We solved most of them." "We did, but there's one we never addressed." "Which one?" "The fact that I'm completely, irrevocably in love with you and have no idea what to do about it." She smiled. "Except I do know. I want to marry you. I want to build something permanent. I want to stop calling this my complicated relationship with my former boss and start calling it my marriage." Ethan felt his breath catch him. "Claire, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "So what do you say, Ethan Morelli? Want to make an honest woman out of your former assistant?" He laughed, the sound genuine and joyful. "I'm pretty sure you're supposed to let me do the asking. You're also supposed to not spy on your assistant's dates and interrupt them with jealous confrontations. We've never been very good at supposed to." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, I'm impatient. And I want this. Want you. Want us to be official in every possible way." Ethan pulled a small box from his pocket, setting it on the table between them. "You're not the only one who's been thinking about this." Claire's eyes widened. "Is that a ring?" "Yes. I was planning to ask you next week, had this whole thing planned out, but you've never been good at following my timelines." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond. "Claire Bennett, you've made me believe in futures instead of just surviving the present. You've made me better, braver, willing to risk everything for something real. So yes, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to spend every day proving that choosing me wasn't the worst decision you ever made." "It's definitely in the top 5 worst decisions," she said, laughing through tears. "But it's also the best, so yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed across the table, not caring that half the restaurant was watching, not caring about anything except this moment and each other. When they finally broke apart, Claire was smiling through tears. "We're really doing this. We're really doing this. Your empire, my strategic mind, and a future we build together. Sounds perfect." And it was. Not simple. Not safe. Not anything like the lives they'd imagined when they first met. But perfect in its complexity, in its danger, in the way they challenged and changed each other. 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony with only the people who mattered. Emily as Claire's maid of honor, Marco as Ethan's best man, and a handful of others who'd proven their loyalty through everything. And when the priest asked if Ethan took Claire to be his wife, he said yes without hesitation. Without calculating. Without the careful control that had defined his entire adult life. Because Claire Bennett, now Claire Morelli, had taught him that sometimes the best decisions were the ones that made no strategic sense. Sometimes love was worth the risk. Sometimes letting someone in completely was stronger than keeping everyone at a distance. They built an empire together, transformed Ethan's organization into something legitimate and lasting. Claire's strategic mind and Ethan's ruthless efficiency proved unstoppable, and within 2 years they'd created something that bridged both worlds, legal enough to survive scrutiny, powerful enough to command respect. And through it all, they loved each other with the same intensity that had started with jealousy in a restaurant, with fights and passion and the absolute certainty that they'd chosen right, that this complicated, dangerous, beautiful partnership was exactly what they both needed. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Claire would smile and say it was a long story involving jealousy, an interrupted date, and a mafia boss who finally learned that control wasn't the same as strength. And Ethan would add that the best decision he'd ever made was hiring an assistant who was smart enough to see through his carefully constructed walls and brave enough to tear them down. They'd built something impossible, something that shouldn't have worked but did. A love forged in crisis and tempered by trust. A partnership that made them both better than they'd been alone. And every time Ethan saw Claire smile, every time she challenged him or supported him or reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place, he remembered that moment in Raphael's, when jealousy had cracked him open, when he'd finally admitted what he wanted, when he'd finally chosen love over control, and he'd never once regretted it.